Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Talk with TQ and the Energy Stoners Cafe. And as always, I try to find the most interesting people I can find on the planet for you. Today, I have two excellent guests, and I'm actually on location in Yorktown Heights at the Capa Space, which is a wonderful, wonderful gallery that's actually a tribute to photojournalist and war photographer. There are two of them, Robert and Cornell Capa. So I'm going to talk to the owners of the gallery. That would be Elise Graham and Timothy Hartung. So they're the owners of the gallery, and I have to say they've done a really great job of presenting this one photographer in their gallery, and apparently there's a lot of work to be seen. So welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me in your gallery.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. So why Robert and Cornell Capa? Why them?
The short answer is because Robert Capa is buried right here. We're on the grounds of the Amawak Friends Meeting House and Cemetery. And when Robert Capa, who was considered by many to be the world's greatest war photographer when he was killed suddenly in 1954, long story, but he is buried here. And that was kind of the inspiration, discovering that he was buried here, and knowing that having lived in this area for over 30 years, wanting to create a cultural space in Yorktown, we put those two things together, and we came up with the Capa Space as a nonprofit. We're the founders, Tim and I are the founders, and we have a board that we're continuing to build, but an active board who helps us run the space, run the programs, and
plan for the future.
Yeah. Plan for the future. Okay, so I'll ask you, what does the future hold? I know you have this current exhibit up, and his work is absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah.
So what are the future plans? I mean, he must have an extraordinarily large body of work, considering he's your featured artist.
Right. This show honors Robert Capa, but our mission is to show photography that supports our mission relative to the ideas of peace, justice, and equality, to show people, the community, specifically the smaller community and the larger community of Westchester, that through photography we can engage everyone in discussion of these topics, and through certain photographers who highlight that, because that was part of their mission as well. Robert Capa, who's thought of as the greatest war photography, actually was a man of peace, and as Elise alluded, a long story as to why he was buried here when he unfortunately stepped on a mine in Indochina. The military wanted to bury him in Arlington Cemetery, but his mother said no, because my son was a man of peace, not a man of war. And so the editor who had sent him, John Morris, to Vietnam, heard about that, and he was a Quaker who lived in Purchase, and he talked to the mother and brother Cornell, and they agreed that the Quaker ceremony, which the Quakers have a similar mission, would be perfect for them. And that's how he ended up here. So, we had a show. We opened this gallery. We're actually only 2 years old in terms of the life of our organization. Last year, we didn't have a space. We were roaming, and our first exhibit was actually at Bethany Arts Community, located in Ossining, by a photographer, William Abronowitz. It was called This Far and No Further, based on a book he did focused on voting rights in the South. And then we were able to negotiate a lease with the Quakers and took over this space in September. 3 years of sweat equity, turning it into the gallery, which you can see around us now. And we opened with one of our board members, Jose Alvarado's work, Empathy and Empowerment. And that was about, he's a photographer with the New York Times and had put together some stories, collections of people who were struggling, be it the children who were losing their food meals during COVID because all the schools were shut down, or a resident here in Yorktown who was also a classmate of his, he was from Yorktown, who got MS at a very early age and was struggling to deal with the bureaucracy of the healthcare system that would allow him to still have identity yet, survive within his limitations as a patient.
Yeah.
And the hurricane in Puerto Rico, where his family was from, and the impacts of that. And so that was sort of a great show to open with in terms of local connections and a way of displaying what our mission is and how this can affect everybody here in the community and beyond. Yeah. And then we have this show on Robert Capa, which opened in April, and it'll be up till mid-October. And then we have, with each show, we have a series of programs which you could talk about, Elise, relative to what we have already done and maybe is upcoming related to the Capa show.
Tell me.
Sure. We had a very successful program in June. It was the presentation of a play. It's called George and Ruth, Songs and Letters from the Spanish Civil War. And it's a reading by two actors of letters that were sent by a young husband who goes off to support the anti-fascists in Spain with the International Brigade, particularly the Lincoln Brigade, which was the volunteers that came from the United States. And it was just the reading of letters back and forth, accompanied by music of the Spanish Civil War. So it was basically two actors and a musician. We did it here in this space, which this was transformed into a very small, intimate theater. Every seat was taken. The audience sang along. It was a beautiful production. It was directed by Katie Schmidt-Fetter, and she did an incredible job. It was fabulous. And we had two shows that did sell out, so we were very happy about that.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And having these photographs as the backdrop, we have, I think, about 10 or 11 photographs from the Spanish Civil War that Robert Capa took. And that kind of kick-started his photographic career. And it was really beautiful in a beautiful setting, and it was just great. When was it? Last Sunday, we had our first, what we're calling a Capa Talk, where we had a scholar, Nadia Baer, who's a professor of the history of photography. She came, and we had an audience who heard her speak about Robert Capa, Life magazine, and visual culture after World War II, another great program that was free. So we invited people in the community to come and listen to what she had to say. It was fantastic.
Yeah, we thought we knew a lot, but
Yeah.
listening to her,
Yeah.
it was like, oh my gosh, it was a real education for
Some big
everyone.
surprises, huh?
Few.
Yeah.
A few.
And everybody was very engaged. I mean, she was a wonderful speaker. She is a professor, and she had slides, and it was really, really good. One thing that's kind of in the works right now is something called When They Served, and we're doing a call for submissions from veterans that served, and we're calling for photographs that they may have taken while they were serving in the United States military. We're getting a fantastic response. Right now, I think we have over 100 photographic submissions that we are going to collate and curate and create a slideshow. We're going to invite the family of the photographers. If the photographers are still around, we're going to have them join us for a conversation and a slideshow.
That's October 15th.
Is that the new?
No, October 15th is no. Oh, no, actually it is.
I think it is October 15th.
I did my research.
It was September 15th.
It did change.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And we've actually, just so you know, we extended the submission deadline to September 15th.
Right.
So if anybody hears this and they look through boxes of old photos, photo albums, or even a phone, depending on when somebody served, and we'd love to see what you have. We're just so blown away by the submissions we've already gotten, it's going to be a fantastic slide presentation.
I can imagine. I can imagine that you've been in touch with the VA about your space. And about
We have, yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting, it took a little while to get them going in terms of getting submissions in. It's one of the reasons we extended the deadline, because they're just starting to get on board and send submissions over, so.
Right.
Yeah, and photography exclusively.
Yeah.
Yes, somebody did send some drawings that they made, and we are going to include them because they give it, it'll give the slideshow some impact that changes a little bit when you see the hand, somebody who was there.
I'm very impressed with the fact that you were able to get these photographs, get your hands on these photographs. Now, when I was looking at your website, I looked at some of Robert Capa's work, and even things that weren't necessarily war. You had one where you, and it was like a very I want to say gentle, but very sort of like a very simple photograph of in a prison of inmates playing chess through the bars.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, "Would you look at this?"
Yeah, that's actually a Cornell Capa
That's
photograph.
Cornell Capa. Yeah.
And we will be showing his work probably in 2024. But yeah, I mean, Cornell, similar to Robert, they were both, Cornell coined the term concerned photography, which he was part of that group as well. And so his show will be similar to this in terms of having a big impact, I think, in the local community and everyone who comes to see it. Our next show, this show ends October 20th now. And then we will have a pop-up show for a couple weeks we're working with veterans and students through a collaboration with a teacher at the Ossining High School. And they're going to come and see the show and then develop some of their own photography. And then we'll have that for a pop-up show. But then in December, our next show is going to be on the work of John Shear, who was he was a photojournalist as well. He passed away 2019.
I think right before COVID.
Yeah. But he was the only photographer allowed into Attica Prison back in 1971. And of course, his most famous photograph was, I think he was only 17 years old.
He was only 17.
Was sent by the New York Times down to DC for JFK's funeral. Just go ahead, kid, go take a few pictures.
Wow.
And he captured the one with John saluting his father.
That kind of
iconic
photograph.
And then John, went on to become a well-known photojournalist. And so he had a show that he put together called American Moments, which we'll be recreating, which focuses on Attica, obviously, the funeral of Martin Luther King,
the Fraser Ali fight.
Yeah. And we'll be doing other programs similar to the programs that Elise was talking about. We're doing for Capa. We're talking with the Ossining prison system about doing some sort of program about prison reform, and probably a panel of people.
We have a fabulous panel coming together.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It seems like the arts, that the prison system, from what I know, I'm somewhat involved a little bit in that.
Yeah.
Tries to, if they can, embrace the arts, but there's always a little bit of a hesitancy, and they tend to pull back from it. I think photography is great. When I look at Robert Capa's work, some of it is obvious that he actually put himself in harm's way to get a picture.
Yes,
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah.
He would always say, if you're not
If your
If
picture's
picture's
not
not
good
good,
enough,
you're not
you're
close enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
You have to
in
get up
John's way-
close. That's the way it works.
Yeah, I mean, there's, speaking about Robert Capa for a minute, and this is from a focus that Nadia shared with us relative to his photography. that in the beginning, a lot of the photography was from a distance because they weren't allowed to get close enough. But then he and other photographers realized they needed to get closer to really document the action. And then there was the question of, well, how much are they putting themselves in harm's way? And that sort of, there's one famous picture of Capa's, which is called the Fallen Soldier, which there's been controversy over the years as to whether it was real or staged. And, you know, I would say the jury's still out because there's a lot of arguments both ways.
Yeah.
But she thought that it was staged.
Yes.
Why did she think it was staged?
Because of the sort of background and, you know, the where it was and was there any battles going on at that time of year at that spot.
Oh.
So there's a lot of research that's
There's been a
done.
lot written.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of scholarship. There's a lot of conjecture.
But regardless, it doesn't really matter because the
Yeah.
photograph has had such an impact in
Yeah.
its life. It's an iconic image that makes people think about what it really means to be at war and the personal impact on dying.
I think even if it's staged, the statement is made. For me, the way I look at it, it's still a piece of art.
Yeah.
But photojournalism
Right.
has a specific.
You're very
Yeah, I
you're
think
right.
that it's like really, to me, I'm like almost jealous of you having all these pictures of his pictures in it and being able to possess them, because I think the world should see them.
Yeah, yeah.
They're
We do too.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
do. That's why you're doing this. And I think I'll tell the audience I would really recommend that they come to see this show
Oh,
to
yeah.
really see what it's really all about. You know, it's not like Hollywood, not even some of the shows that were done later by, you know, the very coveted and respected Steven Spielberg, but this is real stuff.
Well, and Spielberg, you know, he often talks about using some of
Those-
the early images that Capa did from D-Day as inspiration to his Saving Private Ryan opening scenes. So it's had a lot of impact on people.
So I'm wondering how Capa got those photographs. He had to be right in the war. Was he a soldier himself?
No,
No, he was not. He was just a.
he was a photographer that was
He was a
assigned.
fearless photographer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be so passionate to do something like
Yeah.
that, because a lot of the pictures are like really disturbing, where you kind of want to look away, but you got to look. It's not like a
Right.
morbid sense of
Right.
curiosity, but you feel like almost, I guess, what word do I want to use? You feel like it's kind of like the right thing to do, to actually acknowledge the work that these two men have done.
Right. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you talk about being, you know, impressed with the quality and the amount of work. And when people come here to the gallery, we're open, you know, 4 days a week: Thursday, Friday, Sunday at 1 to 5, and on Saturday 11 to 5. And people are just amazed. They walk through the door, and it's like, where'd this come from? You know, here in Yorktown, here in Amawak.
Wow.
So one of our biggest challenges is to get the word out, which we've been trying numerous ways, and this is a great opportunity to spread the word even more. So thank you for having us on the show.
Now, I have a tremendous respect for the military, is that one half of my family is military.
And you know, after World War II, I mean, Capa, you know, there was no wars for a while.
For a while, yeah.
And he was wondering about, you know, what his future was going to be. So, you know, he went to Russia with Steinbeck. I mean, he had a bigger, broader life than just being at all these, you know, war fronts. And, you know, that's another piece of his life, which is pretty interesting. His relationship with Hemingway, all the movie directors and writers.
Yeah. Picasso. There are
artists.
photos here. There's a photo of Picasso, a photograph of Matisse, of Steinbeck, of Ingrid Bergman, who he had a romantic relationship with for about a year. I think John Huston, is that who you're
Yes,
thinking
John
of?
Huston, yeah. So I was thinking that.
So the power of his personality was tremendous. He attracted people, people loved him. And that's so when he wasn't covering a war, he was still doing and photographing exciting things,
Yeah.
interesting things.
I wonder if anybody that is alive now that actually knew him personally.
I think
Well, one
to wonder.
Picasso's last wife, I guess,
she
who knew
just
him,
passed
she just passed away a couple months ago.
Oh,
And she lived in New York City. And some people who lived in the same building with her actually came up and saw the show. And they had supposedly, they were going back to tell her that they had just seen a picture of her with Picasso, the classic where he's holding the umbrella over her, somewhere in the Riviera, I think, that was where that picture was taken. Yes. So yeah, there's and we've met people who have shared the stage with him. Didn't necessarily know him, like Elsa.
Oh, Liesl Steiner.
Liesl
Yeah.
Steiner.
I don't think she knew
No.
Robert. But she
Okay.
was good. She knew Cornell very well.
Okay, that's right.
And actually,
Some of them know
weirdly
more about
knew
Cornell.
Robert's mother, Julia.
Oh, right. That's right.
Wow. I'm wondering, like, where did you find your passion to do this? Where did it come from?
I think the passion was to bring arts to Yorktown. I mean, as Elise mentioned earlier, learning that the Kappas were buried here was like a perfect segue into creating a space like this.
Yeah.
And after years of trying to think about, well, how would we start something and what would it be, having such a famous name gave us a hook.
Yeah.
And so, with Elise's, art background, I was an architect for 50 years. And we just thought, our kids grew up here. They never had a space like this. So let's try to create something for the current kids of Yorktown, and also a place for everybody they can come to and feel safe and see photography, and we can talk about things.
And I also think one of the big factors, at least for me, was, in 2023, everyone has a camera in their back pocket.
Yeah, that's true.
People relate to photography in a way that they might be put off by another type of art space. They already feel a connection. They've already looked at a lot of photographs. So there's like a throughway there for people to feel comfortable here. They don't come in and say, oh, I don't know anything about photography. But they come in and they're like, yes, I've looked at a lot of photographs. So you're so far ahead in terms of your appreciation and your understanding because you don't have that kind of uptight feeling about what you're looking at.
Right.
And I think one of the other factors was just also seeing in the contemporary world how photography can change the world. There have been photographs that have, some people would say ended wars because, they were so effective as, emotional kind of connections for people who were,
I think the sensitivity of the photographer in this particular case, and I've seen a lot of photographers, I know a lot of photographers, I told you, and I've seen a lot of photography, but somehow you can see what really touched these men's soul, what was important to them. It's clearly evident.
Yeah, and although he was considered the world's greatest war photographer, and we have fabulous examples of his work, there's very little blood and gore in any of these photographs.
Right.
Yeah.
His real genius was capturing the emotions and what happens to the survivors and the people on the periphery of the action. And when people come here, they're overwhelmed sometimes by the emotional content of the photographs.
Yeah.
We had a number of photographers. Everyone has an iPhone and everyone thinks they're a photographer, but we've actually had a lot of interest from photography clubs and photographers who live in the area. Has found this place as a perfect place to come and relax, and they bring more friends.
Yeah.
in terms of they bring friends, and then it's like a
That's just
pyramid,
been
you know, and
great.
we like to be the base of that pyramid
Yeah.
to have more and more people come here.
And even though it's journalistic, it's artistic as well.
Yeah,
I
it's
imagine
very,
our historians
yeah.
would be into this.
Well, you know,
Yeah,
in the
very much
vitrines,
so.
which
and
you,
historians.
yeah, the vitrines which we also have here on display are how these images, you know, these photographers, Capa and numerous others, were hired by magazines to fill the pages of the magazines. And that's where people originally saw these images, not in pictures in frame, not in
Right.
picture frames hanging on walls. And so you can see those magazines here in the vitrines and compare, think about how people first saw them. And that's what part of Nadia's presentation was, the impact of Life magazine to visual culture after World War II. Because one, there's the whole issue of photographers and owning the rights to their photography, and that's how Magnum, that Robert and Cornell Capa started, why it was created, but also the transition from a magazine to a sort of art form, which happened more after World War II than any other. That's sort of the key point when it started to happen. I mean, there were professional photographers even at the late 1800s, but it was
Yeah.
not a sort of socially accepted art form in the early days.
Well, I see it as an art form, definitely, and I see it as journalism, most definitely. I'll say equally. And I think you both have done a wonderful job with this space. You're not wasting your time. You're not wasting your space.
Thank you.
And I think that it's commendable that you really are honoring the Capa brothers and also the American military, you know, and also a lot of things I see here. But he obviously was very sensitive and very passionate. So what's next? After this particular exhibit, how long will it be? Up to the middle of October, you said? How
Yeah.
could someone see it online, perhaps, if they couldn't make it here, since this show goes global?
Well, that's a very good
That's an
question
interesting-
that we have to
that's an
consider.
interesting idea.
Yeah.
We were hoping to we still are hoping to send the show on the road. And, you know, that requires making arrangements for other places that are able to take it. And, you know, presenting it at universities seemed a logical course because all universities have galleries that they're trying, and the show's ready, and anybody could put it up very quickly. So that's one idea. But in the meantime, Elise mentioned earlier the play that we did. Well, that play, a number of other people who have seen it are now hoping to produce it in other places. One place is the Kent.
They've already done it.
Oh, they've done
They've
it?
done it at Golden's Bridge.
Oh, they did it at Golden's
Happened,
Bridge,
yeah.
but the one on the lake at Kent,
Right,
New York,
right.
they want to borrow some of the prints to do as we had done, as being a back
Like a
print for
surround.
the play of the Spanish Civil War. So that we'll be able to ship that to another place for a while. So yeah, there's a future for everything, and we just have to figure out what that's going to be.
Well, I'm really happy that you did this. I thank you so much
Thank you.
for engaging me to speak to you about this, because this is more than I expected. And you know, I did see your website, which is Capa Space.
thecapaspace.org.
Thecapaspace.org.
Right.
And you've done an extraordinary job. I think you've already reserved your spot in heaven for this one.
Thank
You know, really. I know, right? In case you had your
Home
doubts.
free now.
In case you had your doubts. In case you had your doubts. But thank you so much.
Thank you. You need to come back when
I will. I will be back.
to see John Shearer's show. That's going to be
Absolutely.
amazing.
And I will bring friends.
We love to hear that.
Well, thank you so much, Elise Graham and Timothy Hartung.
Right.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah.
You've done a great job with this. Thank you so much for featuring American military and Capa, the Capa brothers. It's amazing.
Thanks.
Robert Capa and Cornell Capa. So I'm going to say goodnight to the audience. Thank you for coming to visit the show once again. And please come back, and next week, as always, as I always promise, I'll be looking for the most interesting people I can find on the planet. Bye-bye.